Hi everyone, so welcome to another episode of Trident Talks. My name is Sam, I'm a senior consultant here at Trident Search. Today we're discussing candidate journeys and we're joined by Craig, who is the SOC Manager at Norm. So let's kick this off. Craig, could you tell us a bit about your journey and your background?
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Hi everybody. So I kind of took a non-traditional path into cybersecurity. I didn't complete a degree. I worked for 20 years prior to actually entering cyber. So I guess I'll try and keep it as short, but I started off, I left college, started working within hospitality, just in a kind of part-time bar position for a well-known high street pub company. And didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was very kind of immature and young, as you are when you leave school. And I just kind of fell into my career a little bit, which I know is quite common in that industry. And I started off, part-time bar staff, then moved very quickly into shift management, where when the site managers were off, you were responsible for the team and the shifts and service and all that kind of stuff. And then I went from there then into a general manager role, where I started off in Bristol, and then moved to central London and run some of the flagship sites for that company in London. Then decided that I wanted to make a bit of a change. I worked for that company for 10 years. I then went to work for Krispy Kreme, and I started there in the kind of general manager capacity, responsible for one of their stores. Then that expanded into kind of logistics from the factories, the production of the donuts, etc., etc. And then I went from there into a role where I headed up the national store rollout program. So I think in the space of 5 years, we opened probably about 120 sites all across the UK and Ireland. And I did that for 5 years, a lot of time on the road. I would kind of, very typically do 40 to 50,000 miles on the road a week, a year, sorry. I would be kind of flying all over the place, didn't spend a lot of time at home. I got to a point where I kind of felt that I wasn't really going to progress any further. There weren't really many opportunities for me. People were happy that I was kind of doing the job I was doing. I never really got any personal development further from them. And at the same time, it coincided with my first son being born. And that kind of obviously just, changed my outlook on everything. I then took the approach and kind of said, well, you know what, let's take my career back into my own hands. Let's not just do something because it pays really well. What really interests me? What's going to challenge me? I looked up a handful of different careers. I kind of looked at, considered HR, I considered lots of different areas. And I started off looking into IT and then started getting into cyber. And I just kind of thought, yeah, absolutely, this is where I want to be. Every day's a new day. It's it's lifelong learning. There were just so many benefits to it. And then I made the decision to kind of take that route. I made the leap. I started completing some courses with a training company. I worked through CompTIA A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and the EC Council Certified Ethical Hacker. Then from there, I got passed within the training company into a careers program. They then helped me, kind of network, do all the right things in order to go out and kind of land yourself an entry-level role. And then Norm Cyber came up, a conversation came up with the CTO, went generally pretty well. They really wanted to take me on board, but at the time we were quite small and didn't have the resource to take me on straight away. So it was, as soon as something comes up, we'll get in touch with you. I then kind of said I was happy to. I was actually made redundant from Krispy Kreme at the back end of my certification, which worked out really well for me. So that kind of allowed me a bit of free time. So I said, well, I'll come down and work for you for free for a little bit, just to get a little bit of kind of hands-on experience. I did that, and then 2 weeks later, I started with them permanently, and then it just kind of progressed from there. I think the rest, they say, is history.
Yeah, no, so it's a really good story, and you really taken the initiative as well to offer up your time to work for free, which is fantastic. I suppose as well part of the retraining process of coming into the industry and just trying to get all the skills up to speed. How long how long did that take you roughly? And how did you kind of prioritize your work and your education at the same time?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. I think, I mean, from start of, I think I worked through all 4 of those courses within about 12 months. You get 12 months access to it as part of, as part of the training, once you bought the training platform. In terms of, it's one of those things you just have to kind of commit to. I think it's not something you can do half-hearted. It's not just going to happen for you. And I think that applies to both the training aspect as well as when you've completed your certifications. And I think that applies also to, gaining work experience, gaining hands-on experience, interviewing for roles, looking for roles. That's a big task in itself. And you just have to throw yourself into it. So, a typical day for me would be, I'd leave the house at 6 o'clock in the morning. I do a day's work, check into a hotel at 7 o'clock at night, grab a quick bite to eat, back up to my room. I'd study for 2 or 3 hours, and that would be my day. Ultimately, same as anything in life. If you want something completed or you want to get anywhere, it's on yourself in order to achieve that. So you just have to have that mental state where, this is what I want, this is what I'm working towards, and you do everything you can possible to get there. It was demanding. It was a difficult 12 months in that, I spent a lot of time. I had very little time to myself. I didn't spend as much time as I usually would with my partner, for example. She was great. She was very understanding, completely supported me on my journey. And and every certification gives you a bit more motivation because you're one step further, and you just take every day as it comes, and just make sure you take all the positives to drive you on further.
What kept you motivated in those 12 months? Because appreciate coming from your career before, where you're doing very well, climbed up the ranks, kept very busy and always on the road.
Yeah.
It takes quite a lot of persistence and dedication to be able to hammer on the training and starting from scratch, really, starting from zero.
Yeah.
What kept you going?
I think there are a few things there. I think primarily it was about, as I mentioned, touched on earlier, getting my career back. It was about kind of taking ownership and doing, rather than just doing a job because it pays me, doing a job because it challenges me, interests me. It was an area I really wanted to be in. So I used that as a motivator. I also used the fact that, I wanted a bit of a change of lifestyle. I didn't want to live on the road anymore. So, that was always it kind of worked quite well in some ways, in that my long, difficult days and time away, when I did get that 2 or 3 hours in the evening, I have a very clear vision as to what I'm working away from. So I kind of used that. And then obviously with the knowledge that, I had a young son as well, I really wanted to be able to spend more time at home, and not be on the road so much. So I think those are the 3 key factors, I think, and you just need to keep reminding yourself of them. Whenever you come up against a difficult topic you're struggling to learn, whether it's you're getting lots of knockbacks at the interview stage, whatever it is, you just need to be thick-skinned and just kind of always come back to that base topic of, this is why I'm doing this. And if you take that approach and take a step back from the moment where you're frustrated, angry, upset, whatever it would be, you take a step back and just kind of recenter yourself, then that's a really good way to keep up momentum.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think also quite curious, throughout your career, into that process where you're transitioning, you've done a lot of certs, a lot of self-study, and then when it was time for you to start applying for jobs, how did you find that process in terms of interviewing? What was the most common feedback you found?
Yeah, I think it's well known. I think a lot of people know that within the industry it's a challenge in that you always come up against individuals who are already working in a role. So, there's a lot of frustration that you see, a lot of comments on things like LinkedIn about, why won't anybody take a punt on me? I've interviewed for 80 roles, I've applied for 80 roles, I can't even get an interview. And I think you need to ask yourself the question, why aren't you? I think you need to understand that if you're an employer, Why would you choose somebody who hasn't got any hands-on industry experience over somebody who's been working in a role for 18 months? I think you need to rise to that challenge.
Absolutely.
Because as a recruiter or as a hiring manager, that's a really difficult decision to make, because everybody wants to play it safe. Everybody is going to want to have somebody who can hit the ground running, who can confidently complete a role, over somebody who, in essence, is a risk. You don't know how they're going to. You don't know how they're going to react in that environment. And that was I would say, is the biggest challenge. That's what I found as the biggest challenge, anyway. And I think what you need to do is don't think that just by clicking apply on a job board that's going to get you a job. It's really not. I think, you bearing in mind my journey, I would consider I think that I'm quite happy with my progress over the last kind of 15 months from, entry level into a managerial position. But I think you have to ask yourself the question, how do I stand out? How do I get myself above this person who has 18 months experience, 2 years experience, or whatever it would be? And I think certs are great. They open doors for conversation, but they won't carry you in that conversation. I think you need to get hands-on experience as well. So whether that's building your own labs, whether that's working for free for somebody, whatever it takes, that will help you bridge the gap a little bit. And then on top of that is, don't just be another CV in a pile.
Yeah.
Reach out to people, talk to people, interact with them in any method, for whether that's cold calling companies that have a cyber arm to them, for example, or whether that's connecting with people on LinkedIn. But make that personal connection, because when things come up, people would think of you first rather than the 50 people who are in a CV stack. And those are the ways that I kind of went about doing that. I was very proactive. I didn't wait for anything. As I said, I applied for 70 or 80 roles, and there were a lot of people that wouldn't take a chance on me. And I've had a very successful 12 to 15 months, and that could have been anywhere. But because there were a lot of companies, and this is something for employers, I think they need to be a little bit more open-minded around people and where they come from. Because I brought some skill sets that I probably underestimated when I first came into cyber. I kind of thought that my whole life was left on the shelf and I was starting again. And I think the leadership skills I developed in a previous career really stood me in good stead into what I went into. And even things like, if you don't have that, things like soft skills, customer service skills, organization skills, personal resiliency, all of those skills, if you've got 20 years worth of experience, or 10 years or 5 years, you do bring that with you. And don't think you don't bring that with you. You're not starting from scratch. And I think that's all quite important as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was one of the points I wanted to touch on, is how you found your career progression in cyber so far over the past 15 months. Started from SOC Analyst to now being a SOC Manager is very impressive. What do you think, I guess, really drove that?
Yeah, and I think I've been lucky in that my employer has an open mind in that had an open mind in that asset in the first instance. I think there are benefits to employing people from other industries. I think diversion in the workplace makes a team stronger. So you don't want 10 analysts working for you who all have exactly the same skill sets, exactly the same personalities. Putting it into would the Avengers be as successful if they were all Hulks?
Yeah,
or,
of course.
Would a football team be successful if there were 11 goalkeepers? Pick your analogy, but the reality is diversity in team is really important. So if you can use people's previous experiences to build your team and to improve your team, then I think employers should look to do that more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a really key point, a good analogy you made, actually, and really good key points in regards to coming into the industry, coming into the role, and just having a different skill set to somebody else. because it all balances out, doesn't it? It does make a very coherent and very strong team as well. If everybody was the same, then it just wouldn't
Yeah.
work.
No, and I think employers typically are always looking for a unicorn. You know,
Yeah,
they'll
true.
list out everything that they really want, and they want everybody that works in that job role to be exactly the same, and they want them to fit that job description and personal description identically. But I think you need to think a little bigger than that. I think, as I said, you know, introverts will have typically introverts are technically better, but if you're in a customer-facing environment, then that doesn't benefit you. You know, you need somebody who's going who you need to balance out your team in order to cope with the fact that you interact with customers, plus you work in a technical environment. So I think, you know, for any business, I think that's really key, and it makes the industry stronger as well. I think you know, I think that's another reason why it's quite important.
Absolutely. I think also quite curious is, given your background and coming in, and I hope you don't mind me saying as well,
No, of course.
in comparison to other analysts that have been doing the role for 2-3 years and have been more technical, and you've come in as an analyst and you worked your way up to manager very quickly. How do you kind of work and deal with that kind of difference in technical ability? Because there are some that are going to be able to do things things that you probably don't know yet, as you've not had much exposure to. So there's always that kind of misconception that technical people sometimes don't really get on with people who are not as technical, just because they're not able to kind of like be on the same page. How do you deal with that kind of disparity?
Yeah, I think one thing I definitely do is, if I don't know something, I'll throw myself into it. I don't fear the unknown, which is what a lot of people typically and naturally will do. If you're not comfortable with something, a lot of people will bury their head in the sand or shy away from it. Whereas I'm more of an approach where I'll kind of go, well, if I don't know it, I'm going to do it. And if I do that, then I could play catch up. You know, I've definitely learned a lot very quickly in the last 12 to 15 months, but it's by doing that. It's by not shying away from it, not fearing it, because I think it was Einstein that said, you know, the definition of lunacy is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if I want to improve my skill set, but yet I shy away from it every single time an opportunity arises, I'm not going to change anything. So that has to be self-led. And you know, you put yourself into situations where you can learn, either it within the work environment or externally. You know, I think, you know, I'm very much of an advocate of one, having a very clear training path. And when I say training path, I don't mean cert path, because certs are great, but the benefit of a cert, the reason you take a certification training is to increase your knowledge. It's not for that piece of paper at the end. So I'm very much an advocate of planning out your next 6 to 12 months. What courses am I going to do in that time? It doesn't even matter as much if it's not a certified course. If it improves your knowledge, then you know, that adds just as much value. And I think you just have to have that constant mindset where you always want to learn more. And that is one of the driving factors that brought me into the industry in the first place. Was I came from somewhere where it was very difficult to pick up and learn new skills. It was very, very much centralized around product and service. And anything outside of that was you know, not really considered. So the fact that cyber in itself is such a diverse industry with so many different facets to it, it's a lifetime learning opportunity. And I think you need to grasp that with two hands. If you do that, then, you know, I'm quietly confident in a year's time, those people that have 3, 4, 5 years worth of experience, I would have caught up with them by then.
It's a good approach to have. Very good attitude. In your path, what you mentioned earlier was really good in regards to that path to that journey of just knowledge. I've always kind of upskilling, uptraining yourself continuously. I think that's a big draw for a lot of people to get into cyber. What do you find was, I guess, gave you the most value when you were first starting off in cyber in terms of courses?
Yeah, I think it's you'll get most value from the doing rather than the thinking. So the theology style courses, the CompTIA courses, for example, are very good. Don't get me wrong, I definitely learned a lot from them. But in order to really learn the topic, you have to complement that with some hands-on skills. So, for example, when you do Sec Plus, for example, or Network Plus even, build your own labs. Learn about how everything is communicating within that lab. VMs, VM software and VMs cost you nothing. So, just build that stuff, add in the software, add in a seam if you're considering blue teaming. Get to know Kali Linux if you're thinking about red teaming, and just throw yourself in from a hands-on perspective as well as the theory. Don't rely on the theory to get you where you want to go, because the problem with theory is if you're not doing it, in 3 months' time, you'll forget most of that topic. Most people will only learn and maintain that retention if they're doing it.
Yeah, no, of course. I think that's the case with a lot of these courses and certs. They will teach you, well, as much as you need to know to pass the exam. And then after you pass the exam and they're not relevant anymore, then it just goes back to the resources of your mind and you don't need it. What's next for you in terms of courses on this journey?
Yeah, so I've spent quite a lot of time recently really kind of getting into Linux. Historically, it's not anything I've ever really needed to utilize until I started to work into cyber. So I'm looking at that at the moment. I'm considering something like incident response management or something to that effect, maybe for back end of the year. So that's where I want my skill set, I think, to go is further down those kind of avenues and roads. And from there, who knows? I think I've got a lot of work at the moment in terms of developing the SOC team and managing what we currently have and building on that. And yeah, I think they are probably two, and then maybe some security blue team content I've also obviously mapped out as well for the next kind of 12 months, because again, that's primarily hands-on learning. And those are my kind of 3 priorities at the moment, I think. And that should take me into the back end of the year, and then we'll reassess from there, and pick out a handful of more training topics, courses to cover off.
Always planning on assessing for the next steps.
Yeah, completely. I think beyond that, then I'm kind of thinking, I want to probably look at things from the other side of the fence a little bit. So I did the CEH from a red teaming perspective, but I probably want to get into a little bit of red team hands-on as well. And that's not necessarily because that's where I see my career path going. That's just more to broaden my knowledge base, so I kind of understand things from both sides of the fence a little bit, and maybe we'll kind of be able to do a little bit more threat hunting, a bit more purple teaming maybe, and that's from my own kind of individual skill set improvement plan, I guess, for the next kind of 12 months.
And when you were first coming into cyber, did you have an idea of where you wanted to go into? Because as you mentioned, it's a huge beast of an industry.
Yeah, definitely.
So many different niches and skill sets. Going in. So you've done blue teaming from a SOC analyst, but you could also go down the engineering, architecture path, pen testing, InfoSec management, GRC, risk. So many different areas.
No, completely. I started off because the training company I came through, they kind of almost sold you the red team dream, which is what you see quite a lot of. Everybody wants to be a pen tester.
Yeah, sure.
And that's just due to lack of knowledge, lack of when people think cybersecurity, a lot of people instantly think red teaming.
Exciting, isn't it?
But the same as anything, there are pros and cons. And I kind of got to the back end of my course and I started speaking to people about pen testing. And I kind of just changed my mind on it at that point, really. So I kind of thought that, kind of blue teaming was probably more of a better fit for me. And I think that that's quite common, I think, is, as I said, people will start off with a name of red teaming and depending on their personal circumstances, depending on where they're at, that may change. So I didn't start off thinking I would kind of go into blue teaming, but, by constantly reassessing where I was at and what I was doing, that's kind of where it took me, really. And I'm quite lucky again in that within my role, I do some kind of engineering pieces. It's not just alert. It hasn't been just been alert analysis for the last kind of 12 months. I've got to touch vulnerability management. I've got to touch, as I said, engineering, customer deployment. There's a broader range there, and I think I've definitely benefited from that rather than just being an alert analyst. So my skill set has developed a little quicker because of that as well. So,
yeah, that's brilliant. So you've got a lot more. Your role's been a lot more dynamic, where you've not just been doing the same thing over and over again. You've touched on quite a lot of areas, which will just help bolster your career as well.
And again, it's that no fear thing. Don't fear it. If you don't know it, at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. But it's up to you to educate yourself, or you can't wait for somebody else to educate you. You've got to learn that stuff yourself, and just throw yourself into it. You'll make mistakes, but that's part and parcel of learning, isn't it? You'll make a mistake and not do it again. And I think, but you come out the back of it a lot stronger and more knowledgeable for it. So yeah, I've been very lucky in that I've had the opportunity to do that within the company I work for.
How important would you say company culture is to help with things like this?
Hugely, I think, and it's not that's not just a cyber question. I think that's a general question. I think there are companies out there who just want people to do their job, fill a need, and not really care. And there are other companies out there who will want to progress every single person from ground up. And more often than not, these are the companies that really succeed. The people who have succession planning. Our tier 1 analysts, how do we get them from tier 1 to tier 2? Let's build a personal development plan for them. Let's map out what their training looks like in order for them to get to their goals. I don't think that happens often enough. And that's the reason that there's such a short shelf life on tier 1 analysts. That's probably why they move around roles quite a lot. Ultimately, if you're not prepared to develop somebody, they'll look for somebody who is. And then you have the benefit then as well of internal promotions, celebrating success. Those kind of things are really important as well. So I think that that's absolutely something that I know myself and the guys at Norm will all agree with, and strive to achieve this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think speaking about the turnover of SOC analysts is particularly high. Every 12 to 18 months, they'll be out looking for a new role, and it's for a myriad of reasons. Company culture being poor, lack of promotions, lack of training, nights as well, moving away from shift pattern. It's a whole combination of factors.
Of course.
So yeah, having that plan in place is really key. I've worked with analysts that are working environments where there's just a flat structure and there is no progression in place for them. So they are stuck in that role. And unless somebody leaves, then there's no future of getting promoted. So it's a very tricky place to be in, very difficult to maneuver. So yeah, great company culture is key.
And I think those scenarios as well, when somebody leaves, then we'll kind of go, okay, which analyst are we going to promote into this role? They're not prepared for that role. So ultimately, they spend 3 to 6 months developing to take over that role, when actually think ahead a little bit, get your good people, the people who have the potential and the capacity to improve, help them improve so that when an opportunity comes up, they can then hit the ground running. And people will be happier because you have that culture. People will be happier in their workplace because they're improving, because they feel good about themselves, because they're learning new skills. And I'm not telling anybody what to do. I think everybody will make their own decisions. But for me personally, I think I would rather have that engaged workforce than people who are a little frustrated because opportunities don't come up, because you'll spend half your life recruiting.
And now, as a manager, what do you look for as a candidate who's coming fresh into the industry?
Yeah, I think again, coming back to my own personal journey at the beginning, I think I touch on that. I think beware, have they gone out and what qualifications do they have, be it degree, be it, but what actions have they taken in order to improve their skills technically? What have they done outside of the textbook? What are their long-term aspirations, plans? What motivates them? And kind of, are they in it for the self-learning? Are they in it for because it pays well? Just trying to get to the bottom of those kind of things, and really trying to find people who are driven and who always want to develop themselves, or want to, people who, how do I say this, people who are always actively thinking about themselves and where they sit in terms of skills, experience, knowledge, personality, and how they apply that. People who self-assess themselves a little bit, people who have always got that mindset of, how do I improve a little bit further? How can I add more value? Because ultimately, if somebody has that mindset, they can continually grow the value they add. They'll reap the rewards of it from an employer perspective as well. And those are the kind of things, I think. So, kind of drive, people who are not fearful of learning new things. I think those are kind of some of the key factors, key identifiers, I think, for somebody who would fit with us, I guess.
No, brilliant. I think it's a good way to round it all off. I guess, do you have anything that you could also say to somebody that is thinking about moving into the cyber industry or is struggling at the moment? Any words of encouragement?
Yeah, I think the key thing that I realized you need in order to get into cybersecurity, particularly into an entry-level area, is be resilient, be thick-skinned, understand that rejection is part of the process. Don't take it personally. Seek advice. And it's that continually learning thing. As I touched on earlier, a set of certifications will make me think about talking to you, but the certifications probably won't assist in our conversation itself. The conversation itself is what is going to get you that role. If you can confidently talk to me about functions of a SIEM, the basic networking stuff, if you can talk through that content with me confidently because you've learned it, not just by reading a book, by experiencing it, then you stand a better chance. As I said, you take me as an example. I applied for 70 or 80 roles, and I probably managed about 4 or 5 conversations from that off the top of my head. It would have been very easy for me to kind of say, this just isn't working. I'm applying to lots of jobs. I'm speaking to lots of people. It's not getting me anywhere. But as I said, be resilient, be thick-skinned. Don't take any of it personally. It comes back to that conversation we had earlier around the risk factor. An employer is going to want somebody who can hit the ground running. Why would they choose an entry-level person over them? And that's up to you to bridge that gap. And you do that by hands-on skills, personal interaction. That's how you stand out. And if you take that approach and keep at it, you will get there.
Yeah, and I think it very much echoes the last Trident Talks that we had, where we had Justin discussing how he got into the cyber industry. I think the theme very much to be is get the certs, because they will get you. They will get you in front of the door. But I think just being able to, they get your foot in the door. But I think being able to have the necessary personal skills, the competency and the knowledge behind the certs to be able to do the role, and giving the employer the confidence that you can come in and hit the ground, well, not necessarily hit the ground running, but do the role to full capacity. That's what's key here. I suppose just having certs and that being the B end of all, just having that knowledge behind it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, no, it's brilliant. Craig, thank you so much for taking time. Appreciate things are super busy over at Norm. So it was a pleasure having you on here today. I think it'll be very inspiring to a lot of people who are looking at going into the industry, especially with your very quick, fast rank up your time at Norm. I think that's going to be very inspiring for a lot of people. It's a lot of transferable skills that you've brought along the way. which is fantastic to hear. As you mentioned, you don't need to leave things on the shelf to come into this industry. There are lots of things that you can bring with you, which is brilliant. So no, thank you so much for coming over.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for the time.
Cheers, Greg. Have a good one.